PSN is a private and exclusive network for the sports industry, bringing together senior professionals and industry leaders in elite sport together to share best practices on a completely invite-only and complimentary basis. So it's great to have you all today. Thank you for joining us. Today's webinar, I'm very excited, is all about the evolving role of head of performance in elite sport. So today we are going to hear from Kasper Thornton. Kasper, give us a wave. Wonderfully done, wonderfully done. Director of Human Performance at Right to Dream. We've got Phil Hayward as well, gives a wave.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, great wave there, Phil. Head of High Performance at Wolves. You can see where you are now. We've got the badges everywhere. And we've got Sam Pooley, Head of Performance at Rangers. Give us a wave, Sam.
Afternoon.
Amazing. Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining us. So today we're going to be looking at how elite performance teams define success, the evolving role of head of performance in elite sport, the importance of an overarching performance strategy in aligning departments, building a successful team culture and collaboration across the club. So before we begin, let's thank our partners, Bridge Athletic, Output Sports and Teamworks for their attendance in today's webinar and their continued support as well. Right, let's get stuck in, guys. We've got some general questions to begin with, but attendees, of course, if you do have questions throughout, then stick them in the chat box and we'll try and get to you throughout the webinar. But let's come to you first, Kasper. As the role of head of performance constantly evolves within elite sport, how do you feel the role has changed and what are the most important aspects of your role moving forward?
Yeah, it's certainly a role that's changed. Well, first and foremost, a pretty new role, I guess, but it's also even being pretty new, it's really developed over the last 10 years, I would say. And at least seen from my perspective, it's evolved from one of these guys and girls that's stuck in the machine room and hands-on day to day to being more and more retracted and being a leadership position. We've seen the teams grow and grow and grow, and some teams have so much staff, and we really need this performance director, head of performance, head of human performance, whatever the title is around the clubs, to help and guide and steer this group of people and individuals that works in this high performance environment. So I think that's, for me at least, is the biggest change we've seen from the hands-on to the, I don't want to say hands-off, but closer to hands-off at least. And I think we will see that trend continue. I don't hope we see the same trajectory of more staff than that we've seen the last years, but there will definitely not be less staff, is my feeling. So we need this leadership figure. So I think evolving leadership and evolving practice around leadership for this position is what we're going to see, hopefully going to see even more of over the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And Phil, would you echo that from your experience? Have you got anything to add?
Yeah, 100%. I think that exactly what Kasper said there, the team's now grown so much that actually this role, if it even was a role probably 6 or 7 years ago, because I think in most clubs it has probably sort of been something that's become more of a prominent role in the last 3 or 4 years. But I think previously it was probably a practitioner who was picking up aspects of these leadership elements and was able to balance both some clinical practice, in my case as a physio, or operational work, or gym-based, but whatever your background is, some kind of technical delivery with some leadership responsibility too. But there's just no time for that anymore. I feel like to be able to do a good job and get across all aspects of the team and be able to give the stakeholders the information that they need at the right time, so whether that be the chairman, the sport director, the head coach, somebody else across the leadership team, depending on the structure of the club. There's just no way really of doing that effectively now whilst being involved in the day-to-day as well, which I think is difficult as well, because I think it can be quite challenging to maintain a lot of those relationships that you would like to be able to have by being a bit more set apart. So I think the challenge now for people in these roles is to try and maintain those strong relationships with people within the departments, whilst also being far enough away from it to get that kind of overarching view, to be able to see exactly what's going on and be able to sort of step in where needed to actually have an impact, but actually being able to sort of be far enough away to be able to just kind of let things work, and then be able to recognise when the right time to step in there and take some action or give some input is.
Yeah, no, definitely. And a lot going on there and a lot of elements to consider too. Sam, what about you? Is there anything you'd like to add?
I think, to be fair, I think Kasper and Phil kind of covered most of the points that I'd have added there. For me, I think it depends on the club that you're at. Some clubs, for a head of performance, you might have sports science, S&C, nutrition, plus or minus data, plus or minus psychology. So it really depends on the club that you're at. I think one point that I'd probably layer on top of the kind of strategy versus delivery points that have been raised is, again, depending on the club, the potential for it to be a club first coach role, or somebody who's brought in with a manager. So what that would look like would be very different in terms of their management of a department, their management of the objectives. Their objectives would primarily be to win now and to have an effect on performance from a manager standpoint, whereas a club position is probably more likely to look at the longer term view, the structure of the department, development of the individuals within that department. But yeah, I think most points I would say have been covered there. I think we're starting to see, well, there's been a lot of growth in departments. There's been a lot of variety in specialism within those departments. So there's a lot to manage from a head of performance perspective, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different expertise that you have to try and bring together. Some roles you will still see will be very much hands-on, but expected to have a strategic overview. Some will be very much hands-off. And like Phil was saying, being able to dip in on the ground level, understand what's happening at ground level, plus then come away, have the conversation with the people higher up, sporting directors and chairman, etc. They're very important parts of the role.
Yeah, definitely. And Sam, I'm just going to stick with you for a moment, and we've all kind of covered it a little bit, but just looking at sort of the emphasis on building a successful team culture, how do you guys ensure the performance team, like the players, are all aligned, like in like creating a successful goal, a common goal? Like, how do you guys align? I
think one of the first things that I would touch on here is probably about having a common language, and a language that the departments speak, whatever that is, and that will vary from club to club, and is setting a high performance culture and what that culture is for that club. So that's going to be different for every club. For us here at Rangers is how we do it at Rangers, which is very different to how other clubs would do it. But it's having that common understanding of what is high performance for us, and how are we going to achieve that. How do we set a department up, and how do we communicate with the players? How do we set a culture for everybody to walk forwards in that direction?
Yeah, no, definitely. And it seems like common sense, doesn't it? But there's so many different elements, like you've said before, where you've all got to be aligning together. Kasper, how would you add to that in your experience?
Yeah, I would completely agree, and I would say for us with Right to Dream, it's even more important to work across such a vast different cultures and places in the world, but we also work very tightly with our academies and first team in one big unit. So speaking that common language, both in the literal sense of actually speaking English no matter where in the world we are, so we understand each other, but also in the sense of our medical language, our nutrition language, our physical performance language. And for us, that means to make sure that we made a working group, and we've noted down our strategy and philosophy within what we call performance. So that's everything from medical, physical, nutrition, psychology, and sport and data science, those 5 subdomains. Everything for us is the performance department, and speaking the same language, universal language within that, and establishing how that looks has been the most important factor for us in setting that culture. So I echo completely what Sam is saying.
Yeah, communication is key. Phil, anything else you would like to add?
No, I would just say that I think from my perspective, it's really important for the club itself or the ownership group, depending on the setup, to have that real clear vision and mission, and then for every department to be able to align itself with that. So I think there's a piece of work at the very beginning for the ownership group, with support of the heads of department, to set that bigger strategy for the overarching club. And then each department needs to find a way to fit into that. And I think by doing that, it gives real clarity in terms of what the impact of your department can be on the ambition of the club, how you can contribute to the success of the club. But then also on a smaller level, it allows all the staff within your team to align themselves with your departmental objectives, which then, if they can then see that real clear connection between the department objective and the overarching mission, they've got this real sense of, actually, my little job here, which may be a really small part of a huge department, is actually still contributing to that end goal of the organisation. I think that gives real job satisfaction, really helps engage the staff and motivate the staff. So I think that connection is so important, but it has to start at the top. And if you don't have that at the beginning, it's quite hard then to work in reverse from there. And that's when you can end up with quite a lot of disenfranchised people at the bottom end who don't feel like they're that involved in what's going on, because actually they don't know what their role is in terms of the contribution towards the bigger picture. I think that's a really key thing from the outset.
And I think, Phil, I think also that gives clarity, no matter how the manager will change in a first team environment. If the club sets that culture, if the organization, ownership, or whatever is about to set that culture and framework, it can be, of course, we can change bits and pieces, and that also when the head coach changes. But if we allow the whole system to be changed every time we change a manager, and we know that the average turnover of managers is fairly high in this game, then we completely have to derail from what we're doing all the time. So I think exactly what you're saying is so important, at least for us as an organization, is one of the cornerstones.
Yeah, 100%. And then just, sorry to add in again, Leonie,
no, go for it.
Then in that case, you end up not really building anything over a longer period of time either, because every time you sort of rip things up and start again when the head coach goes, you're back to square one again, and you never really then get that real succession, that longevity in terms of how every department operates, and you just end up having to sort of go through these cycles of making some progress, seeing some results, and then actually things stop there because the team loses 5 games, the head coach gets sacked, then you start from scratch again with a different model, and then it can just cause that lack of continuity, which then means over a 10 or 15 year period, there's no evolution there over time. It's just a succession of 2 or 3 year cycles that don't actually get you much further down the road.
Yeah, no, completely. And I'm a Chelsea fan, so I know all too well what changing managers looks like. Yeah, it's been quite a time of it. Let's come to you, Sam. So what are some of the key performance indicators outside of on-field results that allow you to define success at the end of a season?
I think when we look at a performance department, I think we almost immediately jump to player availability, physical capabilities, physical outputs, and bits like that. But I think what I would question, how much can we actively affect both of those? So availability, how much influence do we have on a training session? How much influence do we have on the program? Now, that will depend significantly on the manager, the culture of the club, the way the club's set up. Sometimes you have a lot of influence, sometimes you have very minimal influence, and in some cases you have a lot of accountability towards availability. In some cases you genuinely just won't have much of a say over what's going on. So looking at availability and physical outputs or physical capacity, again, what's in our control? What can we actually affect? Sometimes we have quite an influence over the training program, sometimes we don't, and it's the manager's way. So what I would look at then would be the bits that we can control. And sometimes they can be a bit more difficult to quantify, but efficiency, how efficient are we as a department? Is that in our communication? Is that in our report generation, in our ability to review and create like a learning loop? What's worked? How do we reflect on that? How do we review it? How do we refine it and then move forwards? Evolution of a performance culture, again, really difficult to quantify, but where are we now? Where do we want to get to? And what are the steps to get there? Are we achieving those steps? And try to drive those things forwards, because they're all elements that are within our control. As much as you want high availability, as much as you want high physical capacity and physical outputs, I'm not sure how much we can get caught up on that being a key performance indicator of a head of performance or a performance department. I try and tend to look at the things that we actually have control over. So is that efficiency? Is that the running of the department, communication within the department, our protocols and processes? Can we improve in those areas, which will hopefully set the foundations for availability and physical capacity?
Yeah. And Phil, is that something that you experience in your role? And then when you're looking ahead to the future, what are the kinds of things that you analyse looking ahead to sort of next season, for example?
Yeah, I agree with Sam. There are so many different factors that obviously play into availability, and there's only so many things that the performance department can control. But having said that, I think naturally the ownership group are always going to be looking at the performance team as the ones who have most impact on that. And I think from my perspective, it's all about relationships. If I can build a really good relationship with the head coach and with the physical performance coach, so that we make sure that actually from a load management perspective, we're getting a really high level of input into what they're doing on the grass, and then we can then hopefully try and mitigate risk by making sure the training load is where it needs to be, that would be a real measure of success for me, because I think it's difficult, because if things aren't going well on the pitch, the head coach, especially the new one, comes in mid-season and says, okay, these lads aren't fit enough, they've got to work harder, which is the typical thing that the head coach says when he first comes in. Just actually trying to do that work with them to help them understand, well, this is why we are where we are. By just blasting them now for 3 or 4 weeks, it's not going to make them play better. It's just going to cause more fatigue, probably more risk of injury, and probably lower performance levels because of that residual fatigue that you're going to generate. So actually trying to give them some education around that is important. I think that's something that we did pretty well here when the new head coach came in January. We did try and work with him to help him control his probably enthusiasm in that first few weeks to make sure we didn't overload them, and we were fortunate around that time in terms of injuries, and we had some good results as well. But I think slightly different to that, one thing that we've looked at here in recent years is we term our RSR, which is our recruitment success rate. So this time of year now, we'll look back through all our recruitment over the last 2 windows and actually look at those 8 or 10 players that we brought in. What's the success rate been of those players from an availability perspective and also from a developmental perspective? So when we did the pre-signing medical, if we identified 4 or 5 things that they needed to work on to be the ideal fit for us positionally, well, actually, how many of those things did we achieve? And actually, did we get them to the point at the end of that first year where we wanted to get them to? So looking at how successful we are with recruitment, because I think in the past we've been guilty of sort of signing players, they do the medical, we say everything's fine, they play 10 matches, you almost forget about the medical, they get injured, it's like, oh, is our player is injured now? But actually, did we miss something on the pre-sign medical, or did we not address something that we identified to then mitigate the risk of that injury? So we're looking at things like that, and also the same with our younger players. So what we would term the TSR, the transition success rates, the lads coming from the 21s to the first team, how successful is that, and how much of an impact are we able to have on those players in that first year in the senior team as well, to try and make sure that actually once they come into our club as a first team player, they stay as available as possible based on the information that we have on them.
Oh, it's fascinating. I could listen to you guys all day. It's brilliant. Kasper, let's come to you. From your experiences, is that something you would echo as well, or is there anything else that you want to bring?
No, I can echo both points. I would say, especially for us, a big point is success of transition from academy football into first team football. It's what this organization is all about across all levels. So it's highly important that we keep track on that. So that's definitely a KPI. Availability with all the problems that comes with it is definitely also one of them. And then I would say for us is also, would even go staff satisfaction within their job. So how well are our staff coping with the current roles? How are they coping with the demands? Do we keep collaborating across borders? So we encourage all of our staff globally to see themselves as one global performance group, and we have cross-departmental meetings across the globe, and we want to see them show up for that, share cases, share case studies, whatever it is, and we look at the numbers of attendees for that and so on in this KPI world. It's a difficult department to have KPIs, and I'm not sure I'm a big fan of the word, but definitely echo what the two others are saying as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you for your answers, guys. Phil, we're going to sort of focus on you quickly now, and we've got a couple of questions here. And guys, remember, those attending, if you do have questions, do put them in the chat box and we'll try and get to you throughout the webinar. But Phil, let's come to you. So what are some of the ways you effectively implement an overarching performance strategy and collaboration across performance and medical departments? And if so, what are some of the challenges as well, if you do come across them, and what are they, and how do you come up with solutions?
Yeah, so I would say that I think, like we spoke about in an earlier question, that overarching vision of the club is an important thing to begin with. And then where does our department sit in relation to that overarching vision and mission of the club? And once we've defined that by sitting down with the key stakeholders to understand what they need from our department, actually, how can we then sort of break down the smaller functions within the department to be able to meet that bigger picture vision of our department? So what we've done here in the last year is set about developing a 3-year strategic plan for our department, which basically looked at what the club needs from us, looked at the skill sets that we've got in-house at the minute, and then looked at potentially what we need to bring into that to be able to allow us to deliver the things that the club want and need us to deliver. And then as the kind of senior leadership group within the performance departments, that's the head physio, the doctor, head of nutrition, head of physical performance, actually involved our head of academy performance support as well in that, to make sure we've got some nice continuity between the first team and the academy. And we set about developing a structure which we felt would then allow us to build out the strategic plan over a 3-year period. So we've divided the department down into 5 different, what we call our performance pillars. So we've got long-term athletic development being the first one, and then player health and injury management being the second one, rehab and return to play the third one, and then performance optimization the fourth. And the fifth one is one which is more sort of leadership focused and involving HR, which is people, culture and environment. So then once we've got those 5 different performance pillars, we then allocated staff to each of those pillars. We've got 5 people within each of those performance pillars, and then they all have their own small project teams then. So over the next 3-year period, they're meeting on a monthly basis to develop different aspects of each of those pillars. And the idea is that in the end, we end up with a playbook, if you will, of all our processes, which is wherever possible evidence-based and evolving all the time to make sure that everything that we're doing across the whole department is focused on our strategic sort of plan in terms of the overall objectives that we look to achieve. But it's also evidence-based and documented, but also then if we lose someone from the department, somebody else can come in and pick that playbook up and know exactly how we operate. We've got videos embedded in there, so all of our testing processes are embedded within the document, so people can sort of exactly see what we do from a testing perspective. Same for the physios, all the sort of common treatment modalities they'll use, that's all documented in there in terms of how you would use that particular bit of equipment in that case, and everything's sort of on hand to allow somebody to come into the department and hit the ground running straight away when they start work. But from our perspective, it means that also hopefully over time we'll just add to that, and then as research evolves and things change, that 3-year cycle will just keep moving further down the road, and what was current 2 years ago will probably be replaced with something else which we found in that sort of current moment, which is going to be sort of more relevant for the next phase. So that's something that we're working on at the moment. We're probably about 6 months into that project now, and I think that's another way of really engaging the staff. So all the staff really feel like they're very involved in that process. They've all got their own area that they're really passionate about, that they can really sort of get their teeth into and bring to the rest of the team. And I think when you've got a large team, it's really important to give people really specific areas to focus on within that, because what we don't want is a big team of generalists who can all do bits of everything. One, a team with lots of breadth in terms of its skill set, where there's lots of different specialties all working at a really high level within that. So we want a team of 20 experts rather than 20 people who can do a bit of everything. So that's what we really try to focus on, and it's working well at the moment.
Oh, brilliant. That's what we like to hear. So we've just got a quick question from Will in our chat. He says, how much consideration would you place upon managing up sporting directors, board owners, etc.? Can you share experiences of this going well or not so well?
Is that me again?
Yeah, you can answer it, yeah.
No, well, I think right at the start, you began by asking about the role and how it's changed over the last 10 years or so. And I feel now that this performance director or head of performance role is probably now part of what the sporting director's remit might have been 10 years ago. So I think that sporting director role has become such a broad role now that they haven't got the time or the expertise to be able to do all aspects of that. So the way we see it here is that actually my function within performance is basically to sort of take that whole workload off the sporting director. So I report into him and let him know what we're doing, and we'll have conversations about strategy, and I'll sort of take the lead from him in terms of the club direction. But yeah, it's crucially important to make sure that they've got a full understanding of what you're doing, so they can see how your smaller plan is fitting into that club plan. You get the feedback from them to make sure that you're delivering what they need. But I think also from a staffing facility perspective, you've got to be able to help them understand why you need to make certain changes, and for them to buy into those changes and support you. Often from a financial perspective, it's really important to be able to manage upwards and make sure you've got that really clear line of communication to those people. So yeah, I think it's crucial. It's a big part of the role.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, go for it.
No, I completely agree. And I think, at least for me, one of the learning points was also how to approach a budget process for a larger department, and everything from we want to change the dumbbells to how we increase the staff, or we need this rehab machine, whatever it is. I think managing up in the sense of learning that with this role is something that has been added on over the years to this role, at least in our case, and for our performance directors around the world, is is having that responsibilities. And there's not a lot of physios or performance coaches that's taught in school how to make a budget, other than your normal private budget at home. So I would say there's definitely some expectations in learnings there, and some of the stuff where Phil touched on what was inside the remit of a sporting director before is suddenly now falling under some of these roles as well.
Yeah, exactly. And just coming back to that point of it's ever changing, isn't it? And you guys are clearly on it and very organised people, which is, again, brilliant to hear. Kasper, let's just
Leonie,
come to you. Go for it.
Just before, I just want to jump in and ask Phil. Phil, if you're developing that and you're in the 6-month process of developing that, I guess, methodology or philosophy, whatever you want to call it, there's going to be like a 3-year project of evolving the department, but how often do you plan on reviewing that, and what does that look like to your, how often do you almost check yourselves to say we're heading in the right direction or we're not?
Yeah, so we're at the start of the process, really. So the first phase, or the first 6-month period, really has actually been a case of looking at where we currently are. So the first bit was looking at what our performance pillars were going to be, what did we need those to be defined as, and then allocating people to those different pillars based on the job role, but also on their personal interests. We wanted to make sure that people were assigned to areas that they were going to be really passionate about and really want to engage with. And then the next step was then to look at what we currently do. I said to everyone at the start, look, this isn't about sort of ripping things up and starting again. Like, this is about just probably being better at documenting what we're currently doing, having some better processes in place just to make sure we've got a record of what we're doing, but also some succession planning there, and also making sure that we can be as evidence-based as we possibly can be. So the first bit was actually just pulling everything that we've been doing for the last few years into one place and saying, okay, this is what now looks like, this is what we currently do. And then where we are now with it is, okay, we've got this working document of where we are at the moment. These are all our current processes. What do we want to prioritize now in the sort of the next 3-month block as something actually where we look at it and think, actually, we're doing okay there, but probably not best in class. Could that be better? And our overarching vision as our department is to be the best department in the Premier League. We want to be the best medical and performance department in the Premier League, and that's something that, to be fair to the ownership group, they're really buying into and supporting, because from their perspective, we're never going to have the best players in the Premier League because we've not got the budget for that. But if we can have the best performance provision in the league, we can then get the most out of our playing squad. So we've got budget for 10th or 12th. We can get everyone working as effectively as possible, make sure all the players are as fit as they can be. Does that then allow us to finish near 8th or 6th each season? That's where we're coming at it from a sort of senior leadership perspective.
And it's such a nice process you're going through. We went through it 2 years ago, and we are on our first update right now of our playbook, best practice, whatever we call it. And I think that involvement of staff in that, there's such a learningful process for everyone involved, to have those passionate people writing about their passion project, and like you said, instead of having a lot of journalists speaking, you have all the experts speaking on that particular matter. I found it super rewarding when we went through it, and now we've collected a smaller group this time to then try to make, like Sam asked, an updated version.
Yeah.
And our aim is to do it every 2 years, and then have 1 year of review, and then 1 year to actually update and follow, and as evidence comes out. But it's a super cool process.
Yeah, and I think, like, I wouldn't see it really as finishing in 3 years. I imagine in 3 years' time that'll be the review of what we've done. Okay, this is now we've got year 3. It's great, but actually now we need to get back to the start again. Maybe we redefine the performance goals a little bit, and then we start from scratch. We start to then build up again, and I think it'll just carry on and just keep evolving over time. That's how I would visualize it.
Yeah.
That's at least how we have done it, for sure. So for this update for us has been first reviewing all the 300 pages, whatever we ended up writing last time, and then picking it apart and saying, is there anything we need to rewrite here? Is there anything that's been outdated since it's written, or there's been new evidence emerging? But also we found out, oh, maybe this whole sector of 50 pages that needs a complete overhaul and rewrite, and then we start that process. So I think, like you said, it's a never-ending story, luckily.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting process to go through and keep yourself accountable to us, at least.
Yeah, I'll be giving you a call after this to get the inside track. Max, there was a bit of work there.
You're more than welcome. You're more
than what PSN do. We connect people. It's beautiful to see. Kasper, let's come to you, because you work with a multi-club environment. So how do you manage sort of the challenges of aligning performance departments across sort of different cultures and different countries?
Yeah, it's what makes this job the best in the performance world, I think. At least for me, really, really interesting. But also probably what makes it one of the more difficult ones to mix cultures across Egypt, Ghana, Denmark, and the USA at the moment. And if I know the ownership right, we're probably not done expanding. So it's definitely a challenge. So I'll come back to the first point, and actually also what we just discussed is to create this common language across all of the sites and use this best practice, as we call it, our playbook, as the reference within all of the departments. And then for us, it's also been about creating equal structure on our site. So we play the same type of football, no matter if you're a U10 player or your first team player. We play the same type, and we mirror that within the performance department. So we want to make sure that 80% of what we do is completely aligned across the world, and then we leave 20% to flex. So it's, of course, there's difference from what you can do in rural Ghana to what you can do in San Diego to what you can do in Egypt and so on. But we can have a methodology and philosophy that is very aligned, and then leave a little flex there. And then it's for us to make sure that our whole group of practitioners, no matter if you're a psychologist or a nutritionist or a physiotherapist or a doctor, whatever you are, that we keep people connected. We keep this network of people that can share ideas, and we can constantly evolve. So what I'm normally, when I have to explain what I'm doing, is I help the organization put guardrails on what we want to do within performance, but it's up to all the employees to keep challenging those guardrails. But if you want to work completely outside the guardrails, you're not for us. And that's completely fair. We want people that will work within the framework of developing strong, fit, robust athletes. And that's been our common language of getting people together. So I think going back to the first point is not to just keep repeating that, but it is the overarching theme for us is having that alignment.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's something, again, we keep echoing it, but that is it essentially, isn't it? Sam, let's come to you. Within your role at Rangers then, and overseeing like the sports science department and how, sorry, let me start that again. Within your role at Rangers and overseeing the sports science department, how important is the relationship with the medical department to maximise athlete performances throughout the season?
Yeah, I think just to give it some very brief context, my role is to oversee sports science, S&C, nutrition, and reconditioning, or end-stage reconditioning. So it doesn't actually oversee physios, doctors, or anything like that. But I think one thing that we have to consciously try to do, although we are effectively two different departments, we have to be very conscious to see ourselves, and we do try to see ourselves as much as possible as one department and work together as one department. I think that's vital that we're aligned in our approach. I think if we're not, then there's gaps, and you'll start to see cracks appear, and you'll see mistakes made, and just issues will crop up throughout the season. So it's essential we see ourselves as one department. It's essential we're aligned in the way that we're approaching performance and medicine, and the way that we're trying to, I guess, achieve our goals of winning at the weekend and developing players. One thing that I'd say is that we're not big enough as a performance and medical department to see ourselves as silos, and it just wouldn't be effective to see ourselves as two separate departments. So it's essential that we use each other, because we need each other a lot, whether that's in S&C delivery or in performance delivery, pre-training delivery. We need each other. In rehab and reconditioning, end-stage reconditioning, we need each other. So it's essential that we work together. So I think for us, I think it comes back to having one common goal of having as many players available as possible, as robust as possible, and working together with a common goal, common language, alignment across both departments to effectively have one department to achieve what we're trying to achieve. Yeah. If that answers the question, I think that does.
No, absolutely. And obviously, like starting mid-season in January,
yeah.
How do you sort of balance the immediate demands for results with implementing a longer-term strategy for future success?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that I came in. So I was fortunate enough to spend some time with the previous head of performance. So was able to spend a bit of time just to kind of understand where the departments are at and what's the need of the club. It was quite clear that we needed stability, and the remit of my role wouldn't have been to come in and make changes from the start, and that also just wouldn't have worked. That's not what we needed at all. Mm-hmm. So I needed to come in and provide an element of calmness to the environment and some stability, to try to breach some relationships and some gaps between staff and between coaches and performance medical staff. That was quite a big part of the role. So a lot of my role initially was to create an element of, I guess, harmony of connection across performance, medical and coaching. But at a club like Rangers, we have to win every weekend. So we've got to do it with the objective of performance in mind. So as much as we have, or we want to win, we want to achieve the results. A lot of the role was initially coming in, taking some time to see the department for what it is and understand the needs and the demands of the department. And then that allowed me to take a bit of time to then sit down with the staff and set an outline of where we want to be for the start of next season and try and put the department in the best possible place for the start of next season. And we used it really as a 4-month period of, like, if this is where we are now, where do we want to be for next season? Next season can't be a transition year. It has to be a year where we're trying to be as successful as possible. So what is essential for us to be as successful as possible next season, and set that and use this 4-month period with the off season to really establish what our long-term vision is going to be for a performance and medical department. Start to put those wheels in motion, and hopefully by the time we get to pre-season next season, everything will be in place for us to kick on as a club.
And did you find any secret sauce you can share there? Like
There's definitely no secret sauce, no.
Oh, damn it.
And then when you're joining a club like Rangers, Sam, do you feel pressure personally, or do you just see it as, this is my job? I'm very well. You're clearly very good at your job and effective, but do you feel any pressure going to a big club like that, especially being in Scotland as well, because you've the rivalry too?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I felt pressure because of the size of the club or anything like that. I think the expectation, I think when you work in a performance environment, the idea is that you win every weekend, regardless of who you're playing. So you're never really setting out to do anything other than that. So the pressure should always be the same, really. Like you want to achieve as much as possible. You want to be as successful as you can. And that success is relative, I guess, to each club. But for Rangers, it's winning titles. When I joined, we were a little way behind in the league anyway. So it was about closing the gap as much as we could. But it really wasn't in our hands at that time. So there was no real pressure from that sense. But I think moving into next season, the pressure will be that we have to now win, and we have to win the league. We have to win in the cups, and we have to progress as far as possible in Europe, with the aim of being in the final. Obviously, we've reached quarterfinals this year, so still some work to do there. But I think the pressure will probably come next season, because this year was very much I was given the license to come in, understand where the club is at, and set together a plan for success next year. So we will definitely be judged on that next year. That might come with an added element of pressure, but I think if we stick to our processes and we're all aligned in our processes, and that comes from the new sporting director setting a pathway for the club, like Phil's kind of touched on, and we are aligned with that. We are aligning our performance processes with that. Then I think if we can measure that and we can review and reflect on that, then that reduces the element of pressure or the feeling of pressure.
Just chip in there, Sam. I'd just say that Sam, Kev Thelwell, someone I know really well from my time with him at Wolves, and a lot of the stuff that I've implemented here from a strategic perspective is stuff that I learned from him. It's his baby. He loves all that stuff. So I think you're going to have a really good time with him developing that big club vision. How your strategy fits into that is going to be something that you can really work with him close, and he'd be a really good person to work with. And that, so you've got a lot to look forward to there from my experience of working with him.
Good.
That's good. That's what we like to hear. So we've got some questions, so I'll read them out, and then guys just chip in as and when. So from Reese, we've got, he says, personally, I find it difficult to balance leading our programme and delivering on it. There is myself and a part-time performance coach working across 4 age groups. How might you weigh up LTAD and delivering well for the current set of players?
I guess I can start. I mean,
Go
I think
for it.
it's a situation that certainly I found myself in a few years ago before I came into this current role, and it is a challenge. And I think that's where you've got to be really well organised to start with. You've got to be able to delegate really effectively. Is there a way to potentially enhance the workforce by utilising master's students, PhDs, those kinds of opportunities with local universities, maybe if it's an academy setting we're talking about, to try and get some more manpower there, because I think it is very difficult to be able to deliver really effectively and to be able to lead the programme effectively if you've got a lot of different squads to get across. I think just try and leverage those relationships with universities, try and get some students in. Maybe you can bring some younger staff up or staff from younger age groups up to try and give you some more support and give them some experience. Just try and delegate as effectively as you can do. And again, it all comes back to being able to sort of communicate what you need them to do and help them really understand what you're looking to get from them, and then sitting down with them to review it afterwards as well.
Yeah, I would agree on that point. That's also how we did it with our Danish club, which is at least at that time was a fairly small club with a fairly small operating budget, and we faced the same problems both on the medical side and the performance side, and what we did was to make a cooperation with the local university and get both bachelor's and master's students, basically take whatever we could find and then make a program for them. So we made sure we also gave back to them and made sure it was actually a good experience to come to us, but leveraging that was a big thing for us. But I'll say, if you're in a situation where you can't do that, for me, it will always be the player-facing work that needs to win. And it's the one-to-one with the players, or delivering the gym session, or delivering on the pitch, whatever your role is deliver for those players. And then the rest will come later. But being that player-facing thing in that environment is, in my opinion, the most important part of it.
And I think it's prioritising the important bits as well. So understanding there might be 10 different aspects you can go after, but actually what are the 3 most important things? Target those and make sure they're done really well, rather than trying to do 10 things in an average way. Let's try and do 3 things really well.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Oh, Reece says, thanks, guys. Okay, we've got another question here. Again, guys, feel free to chip in. It's from Alyssa. I hope I've said that right. She says, how do you ensure the performance department contributes towards long-term goals in spite of staff rollover? What systems are in place to manage and measure success of staff in each role?
I can start on that. I think it comes back to what we discussed a bit earlier. So for us as an organization, it's paramount that the strategy and philosophy doesn't change with change of head coachship. It's decided with the performance directors across our group and the board, basically, with the global head of football. And for us, that is the strategy. And then we will, in the end, we will pick managers that will work with inside that. And for our organization is a bit special with this, but also goes for the style of play on the pitch. We will not allow a manager to just come completely change the way we play football. That is set by the organization. And for us, the same here. This is a set framework we work for. It doesn't mean that it's a manual just handed and people have to work like this, but it's a set of guiding principles. So for us, that's how we make sure that no matter how our staff turns over within the performance department or within the technical and coaching department, it doesn't fluctuate with what we want to do as a department overall. It might change small bits, it might add or remove stuff from the program, but in the end, the keystones are still the keystones. So that's how we do it, at least.
I'll just follow on from that, because I think that answers quite a lot of the first part of the question. Second part around managing and measuring the success of staff. I think most clubs, most organisations tend to have a performance development, like a review end of season or every 6-month review in place. And what I've found is, I personally don't know how effective they are. I think every 6 months or every 12 months isn't frequent enough. So what I've developed in the past is like a staff development framework, and that would look at all areas of, say, performance, and identify where each individual would need to upskill, or where they want to upskill for their, not just for what we want as a club, but for what they want as an individual to develop in their own career. So try and take what we need as a club and what they want, marry the two up, and come up with a development framework. We would then sit down on that very frequently, probably as often as every 6 weeks, to to every 3 months, and try to be quite regular with setting objectives, setting targets for each of the individuals, measuring against what we've discussed and agreed on. And then for me, I guess my role in that is ensuring that they try to stick to that as much as possible, ensuring that they try to develop themselves, but also if it comes to supporting them from a financial perspective, how do I then challenge the club to help develop the staff? How do I put like CPD budgets in place? How do I go back on the club and say, look, this is what we really need. We have a skill gap here. We've identified a skill gap for the department. This person can fill that gap, but to do that, we need to upskill them in this area. How do we then go and how do we get the right CPD? How do we get the right budget for them? And I think that's something that the head of department and head of performance will probably take on as our role, is ensuring staff development, ensuring continual development in the way that the club need it to move forwards, but also in consideration for what each individual wants to do in their career, providing they align and they fit. So I would say in terms of systems, there is generally normally there's a review process, staff development review, but I've personally set in place a different performance framework, understanding what it is that we need to identify as a development objective for each individual, working on that, and then it's on me to ensure that they stick to that, but also to try to assist with any sort of CPD or any like financial commitments from the club perspective.
Yeah, and Phil, is there anything you can add to that?
I would just say that for me, I think it's important to make sure you have lots of regular check-ins and shorter term touch points as well. So as well as maybe a bigger 6-monthly or annual performance review, which is maybe more of a HR type process, actually setting aside time once a month or once every 6 weeks at the longest to sort of sit down with your key staff. So I've probably got 8, and having a really good conversation with them about their role, what challenges they've got, what help they need from me to be able to overcome any obstacles that are in their way at the moment, and then making sure they're doing the same with their staff as well. So we've got that framework in place. It's not so much a system or a process, but it's just a sort of routine set of checkpoints, which I might not even document, but I might just then send an email to sort of clarify the points we discussed, some action points for next time, and then we'll sit down and go through it again. And I think one thing that I've really learned probably in the last 3 or 4 years is that I think preparation for that is key. I think sometimes I've sat in meetings with staff when perhaps I've not prepared as well as I ought to have done. You sort of sit there, they're talking to you about their issues, and they know if you've not sort of spent an hour or so beforehand really thinking about what your plan for that meeting is to help you get the most out of it for them, they recognise that. So I think for me now, I do spend as much time, if not longer, prepping for the meeting to then make sure we can have as much of a meaningful conversation as we can do in that time we are together, as I do probably in the meeting itself. I think that's a really important thing, which I probably didn't pay enough attention to in the past.
Yeah,
and I think that's such a valid point, and I completely wholeheartedly agree. And I think also a part of that is creating the everyday culture that your staff can feel they can come with that to you when it comes time with that. So that's everything from the casual over the counter, get a coffee on the corner while we just discuss kind of things. But it's creating that, I always want to use the buzzword at the moment, is the psychological safety, but like having that culture, having that environment where your staff can come. Because when we get to these kind of staff interviews, it is their interview, it's for them, it's not for us, it's for them, and how we can help them get on this development journey with CPD or whatever it is. But for them to be able to open up, it requires an environment that we have helped build on an everyday level.
Yeah, for sure. If anyone's got any more questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. We haven't got much longer, so if you do have them, please put them in now. I'm going to ask you quickly, everyone, what's the best thing about your job?
Seeing academy kids come through the whole system and succeed. And for me, that doesn't matter if it's on the pitch, debuting for one of our first teams, or it's graduating school and getting on a college pathway. But seeing these kids go through our whole system and succeeding in the end, that fills me with an immense amount of pride.
Beautiful.
I would say, from my perspective, just seeing the department and the staff within it succeed, and delivering what we think is the right thing for the club and what the club need of us, and sort of seeing that sense of satisfaction that the staff get from doing that, and almost sort of trying to separate that from team results. Obviously, if the team get relegated, it's going to be a big problem for the whole club, and definitely for our department in terms of budgets and staffing levels, that sort of stuff. But as much as possible, sort of try and separate ourselves from the club sort of outcomes and just try and look at our department, and if we're doing really well and contributing to that bigger overall picture, then actually for me that is success.
I think from my perspective, I'd say the people that you work with, the cultures that you get to work with, and the experiences you get to have. I guess the people would be the staff around you, the department that you form, the department that you get to build and develop, the experiences that you get to have, anything from challenges at the training ground to European fixtures and like working in the Premier League or working up here, big games up here in the SPFL, all those experiences. But I guess the experiences don't really matter so much if it's without those people that you're working with day to day. So I guess that forms probably the biggest part of it, the people that you're working with, the department that you get to set up and develop and progress over the years.
Yeah, no, definitely. People matter for sure. Right, we've got one question here. Phil, I know you've got to go very soon, but I'll pose the question anyway. Do you think a performance director / head of performance will be a fully non-delivery position in the future?
I thought you were going to hit me with the next question. I'm watching I think I might not have time to read that before I have to go.
No, don't worry. I was strategic. Don't worry. I'm on it.
I would say already is in many clubs. I think in our club, I'm not doing loads of delivery. I might have the odd conversation with the doctor about an injured player's plan, or there'll be times when me and the physio sit together and talk through stuff that's clinical. But from my perspective now, I'm definitely not the best physio here. Like, and it'd be wrong if I was, because actually I'm not doing that anymore. My job is to sort of be the conductor of the orchestra and make sure people can do their jobs really well and facilitate that. But if I was the best physio, then I wouldn't be able to do my job really well. So for me, my role has to be about being the best leader that I can be, to then give them the opportunity to deliver as effectively as they can in their role. So for me now, I would say that probably at most medium to bigger clubs, I think that's already how it is, to be honest.
Yeah, no, definitely. Phil, if you need to go now, that's absolutely fine. But I don't want you to leave without us saying thank you. Thank you for your time. And it's been amazing to hear all your points. And no, really, really do appreciate it. So thank you so much. And I hope you have a good season next season, but not too good. Not too good.
Thank you very much, guys. And thanks for everyone who's watched. And thanks to the speakers. Cheers, guys. Thanks, Leonie. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So we've got a long question from Jared. We've got time, so I'll read it out and throw it to you guys. He does apologises for the long question to begin with. That's absolutely fine. He says, from my experience, I've found that heads of performance, sports science and medical departments are often at the forefront of a club's development strategy. They tend to demonstrate a strong growth mindset, consistently seeking innovation, progression and ways to drive performance forward. This contrasts at times with more traditionally hierarchical roles within the club structure, which can be slower to adapt or more fixed in approach for many reasons. I'll breathe. Have others experienced this dynamic? And if so, how have you worked to bridge that gap, ensuring collaboration and alignment without compromising your ability to deliver effectively in your own role?
That's a long one. I think I think first and foremost, Jared is completely right. I completely agree with the whole sentiment of this nice and long message, and I think we still see it every now and then for sure. And it's I think the only way to tackle it is to keep having an evidence-based mind, having an evidence-based way of problem solving. So when we go to some of these where things are a bit more tight, a bit more hierarchical, a bit more everything, then we need to just go forward, present our case, make sure we can back what we're saying, back our opinions, and then keep presenting. And it will take time. Football is a slow evolving sport. I always say that it's a sport filled with the narrative of being, we do because we have always done. And that takes time to change. And I think, at least how I found it, is the only way we can go about that is keep being consistent and presenting, but making sure that we have our backs covered, that we don't come present unfounded claims or anything, but we stick to the literature. At least for me and for our department, that's the way we go forward when we try to push this. So I think that's my advice.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. I think I'd say football clubs are like strange businesses in the sense that you got like very, like Jared said there, very kind of structured, hierarchical kind of elements to it. within maybe finance, within HR, within certain areas of a club, but then you have very fast, dynamic, or departments that have to be very fast and very dynamic, whether that's coaching, analysis, performance, medical. So you've got two very different worlds and very different, I guess, people and personality within those roles. We have to react very quickly. We have to behave in that way, and we have to be able to be very adaptable and dynamic. Whereas other people, they don't necessarily have to have that as part of their role. That isn't necessarily in their role. So when it then comes to us trying to progress or trying to, you might be recruit, or it might be to, I don't know, develop some sort of CapEx budget, that can be a much slower process than what we used to do on a day-to-day basis. So you quite often come up against obstacles that are far slower moving than you would normally experience. I think that's just natural. But I think for us, we have to always challenge, always try to check and challenge as much as possible, always try to progress as much as possible. I think we have to be understanding that other people are very different and their roles are very different, but that doesn't mean that we just accept. I think we can still challenge, and you can still try to drive your areas forwards as much as possible. But yeah, I do agree that you've got, within clubs you have very different like business models. One's very fast, one's very dynamic, and the others tend to be a little bit slower.
Yeah, perfectly answered. Thank you, guys. So we will wrap it up now. If you do have any more questions, then we'll connect you with James.